What if I told you that Kaitlin Armstrong, in fact, is not a jealous person?
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. In the final 10 minutes of NBC's Dateline documentary, The Last Ride, they end with a twist. After presenting their story, the host asks,
"But case closed? Hardly."
Cue Rick Kofer, Kaitlin's attorney. Dateline correctly describes Kaitlin's counsel as a very confident defender. Kofer's opening words when he appears are, "Kaitlin Armstrong is not guilty, and if this case goes to trial, she will be found not guilty." So, what do you think about that? We're going to go step by step through Kofer's 10 minutes and have a look at his case and how he presents it. I'll also put a link to the Dateline documentary on NBC as well as the trailer to that in the description. But before we get to the analysis, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. Like, share, leave a comment. Bear in mind, I'm going to tell you guys at the end of this episode about a very important live stream I'm doing later today. So look out for that. And let's get started. As an intro to our analysis, I have to say it's ironic that about a month ago, Kofer on the one hand was accusing the media of creating a media circus and complained of the narrative of the case being, quote, far too defined, end quote, regarding his client. But at the same time, Kofer himself opposed a gag order filed by the Travis County District Attorney's Office. They wanted to prohibit, quote, prejudicial comments to the media, end quote, and Kofer wanted to oppose it. Well, now I think we know why. Wasn't it so that he could participate in that media circus and perhaps try to fix the far too defined narrative of his client? If that is what he did, the question is, does he succeed? So for a second time in about a minute, Keith Morrison, the NBC presenter and narrator, emphasizes how Kaitlin's attorney exudes confidence. Kofer starts off by saying, "You become a lawyer in part to work on cases like this." Now, there was a stage I wanted to become a lawyer, but I have to wonder, why would you want to work on a case like this? Isn't this a case that's going to be a challenge for a defense lawyer? Unless he's suggesting he's the champion of the innocent, or perhaps he's saying you want to be part of a high-profile case. Either way, what Kofer seems to be quite good at is being confusing while appearing confident. Morrison then briefly sketches out the sketchy circumstantial fabric surrounding this case, the CCTV of the vehicle, the sale of the vehicle, the flight to Costa Rica, the plastic surgery. All of this produces the slightest of smiles on Kofer's face. Then Morrison says, I mean, if she didn't do it, why go to all that trouble? And so, how does he respond? Well, Kofer clasps his hands in front of his tie and makes a big statement.
You know, looks really can be deceiving.
And at this response, Morrison appears to be trying not to smile himself, or perhaps hiding a smile. Kofer then goes on to say, but what if I told you that about 98% of what you just said is either completely incorrect or mostly incorrect? As I said, what Kofer seems to be quite good at is being confusing while appearing confident. 2% incorrect. Why not 1%? Normally you say what you said is 99% not true. Why would it be 98%? And also a combination of completely incorrect or mostly incorrect. Now, the fact that your mind sort of drifts into this calculus is why Kofer succeeds in creating doubt. You don't simply need to create doubt about actual evidence. You can simply wrong-foot the confident mind into second-guessing itself in general. And so, does he do that? And if he does, how does he do that? Let's have a look. Kofer says, appearing agitated, the crux of law enforcement's theory, from within the first 24 hours of this case, they had decided that Kaitlin Armstrong is a crazy, jealous person who in a fit of rage murdered Miss Wilson. And that's a verbatim quote. Kofer then goes on to say, what if I told you that Kaitlin Armstrong, in fact, is not a jealous person. And that's the clip I played at the beginning of this episode. Now, I don't know if one can apply objective fact to subjective personality and say that it's a fact that a person is amusing or boring or intelligent or uninteresting. Can you say that it's a fact that you are hungry? Well, your hunger subjectively might not be hunger to a person who's, for example, malnourished. But Kofer's argument is otherwise fairly sound. I mean, on the whole, if you think about it, it feels like Armstrong doesn't tick the jealousy box to some of those who knew her. On the other hand, I'm not sure if it's correct to say that it's a fact that there were no signs or signals of jealousy. For example, if Kaitlin's vehicle was passing by where Wilson was staying on the night of the incident, that alone would be, I think, sufficient challenge to that confident statement, wouldn't you say? I also think we need to be fair about human nature and the ordinary dynamics of romantic relationships. I don't think you need to be a rocket scientist in behavioral psychology to acknowledge the obvious. Even very laid back, not confrontational, secure, confident people will likely feel insecure, inadequate, and jealous if they find out someone they care about is cheating on them. It's not only a natural response, it's an affirmative kind of narcissism. If you didn't want to protect a relationship that you'd worked on and invested so much in and didn't want to find out its true status, there'd be something wrong with you. So a certain amount of jealousy is absolutely natural. I don't think you can say in an on-off romantic relationship in particular, where a third party intrudes intermittently, that someone who is not a jealous person would not be jealous. I think anyone would be uncertain in that situation. Do you agree? The other aspect is that unusual jealousy does seem to appear in this narrative, not only via a third party, but even in the substance of Colin Strickland's own actions and admissions. It's in the fabric of the narrative of the affidavit. Let's have a look at it. Wilson and Strickland then had a romantic relationship before Strickland ultimately began dating Armstrong again. What that means is inside of the relationship between Strickland and Armstrong, there was a fling or some kind of interruption where Wilson came into that story and then seemingly departed again. The question is, did she then come back? But you can understand if someone comes into and sort of invades, intrudes in your relationship with someone, it's going to cause all sorts of problems. Going back to the affidavit, Strickland advised while he and Wilson were dating, Armstrong called Wilson on the phone, telling Wilson she was the one who was dating Strickland. That's from Strickland. Strickland told Detective Spittler that he had to change Wilson's name on his phone so that Armstrong does not know who he's speaking to as they continue their relationship. Strickland admitted he had to change Wilson's name on his phone because Armstrong had blocked Wilson's number in Strickland's phone. Strickland also advised he had to delete text messages on his phone to prevent Armstrong from finding them. Now, if it's true that Kaitlin went onto Strickland's phone and blocked Mo Wilson's number, doesn't that already tell you something? If it's true that Kaitlin followed Mo on Instagram and on Strava, doesn't that tell you something? It's hard to imagine anyone in a situation like this not feeling insecure when they're following the movements of a potential threat on social media and then actually, or arguably, seeing that threat even arrive in Austin. So going back to the affidavit, someone called Jane advised that Armstrong discovered Wilson's phone number and contacted Wilson several times. Now, where could you maybe find someone's phone number? How about perhaps on social media? And anyway, that caused Wilson to actually block Armstrong's phone number. Jane then goes on to say that Wilson told her within the past 2 months, so within the 2 months before Wilson died, Armstrong began following Wilson on Instagram. Jane advised the last time Armstrong called Wilson, she told Wilson she was with Strickland and Wilson needed to stay away from him. And then the question is, did Wilson? Well, we know what happened on the night that Mo died. She saw Colin. She was told not to, but she saw him anyway. If Mo Wilson also had to block Kaitlin's number on her phone, well, that is a matter of fact, isn't it? So I'm not sure you can say with any degree of confidence.
What if I told you that Kaitlin Armstrong, in fact, is not a jealous person?
Does that make sense? At this point, Dateline cuts to an image of Kaitlin doing yoga. I suppose you could counterclaim that yoga does not equal jealousy. But I would say, sometimes appearances can be deceiving. What does Kofa say about the ballistics analysis? Well, that's quite interesting. Kofa says, quote, ballistic analysis is functionally a junk science. It's another confident statement, and like the absolute statement about jealousy is somewhat true, but it's also somewhat not true in the sense that if ballistics can't absolutely prove something or cannot absolutely connect a perpetrator to a crime scene, it's not completely worthless either. Ironically, when you take Kofa's argument about ballistics and you think about the term smoking gun, it's kind of like saying, well, a smoking gun isn't a smoking gun. A smoking gun can't be used as smoking gun type evidence, as sort of absolute, the biggest absolute red flag in a case. I mean, they always say, this is the smoking gun in a murder trial. This proves that someone did it, as if to say a smoking gun is the sort of pinnacle of evidence. And in a way, ballistics, the way Kofa argues it, is to say, well, a smoking gun isn't smoking gun. Does that make sense? So I think ballistics do matter. I think we see that in the Alec Baldwin case. Ballistics isn't just how the projectile moves. It's also a study of the processes within a firearm as it is fired or after it's been fired. And I think in the most simple way, ballistics can tell you which firearm was used, or indeed if it was used. And sometimes it can tell you if it was or wasn't recently used. A good example of whether or not a firearm was simply used or not is in the Morphew case, where Suzanne's husband was a hunter who owned numerous firearms. And then you really want to include or exclude some of these firearms in your evidence.
It is a type of witchcraft, if you will.
That's not entirely accurate.
So in the same way that a polygraph technically is also what he refers to as junk science, it's not really completely admissible in court. What a polygraph can do is it can indicate whether someone is basically telling the truth or not. It doesn't really matter really the details. It just sort of gives an indication. Is this person generally reliable or not? And that's going to kind of help an investigation. The ballistics work kind of in the same way. And I would not quite equate ballistics with polygraphs because ballistics are admissible in court. And all of that is used to push the culpability one way or the other. So I'm not sure I'd be so quick to dismiss ballistics as junk science. But Kofa totally dismisses ballistics, calling it a type of witchcraft, if you will. But I did think it was interesting to argue that just because a gun, just like Kaitlin's, fired the fatal shots, there's no absolute proof of that. I mean, it says in the affidavit, the potential that the same firearm was involved is significant. That's different to saying, there's absolute proof that it was that particular weapon with serial number 66B870292. So anyway, right now we're about halfway through Kofa's argument, and I'm not going to take it further than that for now. If you guys found this analysis interesting, let me know and I'll do a part 2. Let me know in the comments. Now, I am going to do a live later today where we'll deal with an intertextual aspect to the Kaitlin Armstrong case, or something I believe is strongly intertextual, and that is relationship dynamics. So just as I think the fabric of the relationship dynamics and also the circumstantial aftermath is really an important aspect to the Armstrong case, I think one needs to look at exactly that in the Adnan Syed case. And what we're going to do is examine the fabric of relationship dynamics in that case and examine just how important that can be to piecing together or indeed dismantling possible motive. Now, I've got to say I'm not an expert in that case. It's in a way similar to my expertise in the Kaitlin Armstrong case. We're still learning the information. We're still getting information in dribs and drabs. And so, to an extent, my knowledge of the Adnan Syed case is on a similar level to the Kaitlin Armstrong case. And so the question is, what insights can you get from relationship dynamics? Well, we'll look into that. But I think in the main, Kofa is right. Appearances can be very deceiving. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.